If mankind is left to his own devices, he would settle down and naturally be a capitalist. Now, when I said that mankind's natural tendency is to be a capitalist, I should have also said that this tendency includes a high standard of morality. And indeed, most of the problems that we encounter represent a breakdown in moral standards which are part and parcel of capitalism, free markets, laissez-faire, whatever name we might give to the process where property is privately held and mankind goes about his ordinary business engaging in peaceable, voluntary exchange. Frederick Bastiat, which I'm quite sure most of you know about, he's the French philosopher economist who wrote an excellent little book called The Law. And if you have not read the book, your instructions are to read the book tomorrow. And if you don't have the book, write me a letter and I will send you a copy of the book. Frederick Bastiat said, when law and morality contradict one another, the citizen has the cruel alternative of either losing his sense of morality or losing his respect for the law. We Americans are increasingly encountering Bastiat's cruel alternative. And let me spend just a few moments examining this phenomenon. Traditionally, the common law assumption was that if one behaved morally and used common sense, the reasonable person doctrine, some of his actions could possibly lead to civil penalties for accidents and mistakes, but not to criminal penalties. With the growth of the Leviathan state in our country, that has all changed. Under what lawyer James D. DeLong calls the new criminalization in our country, with its increased complexity and arbitrary provisions, no American can rely on his moral compass or common sense to steer him clear of criminal prosecution. For example, let me give you a few examples. An engineer in Maryland was contracted to do work on private property. He was imprisoned for polluting the navigable waters of the United States by merely dumping 2 truckloads of soil on dry land. A rancher was criminally prosecuted for clearing brush from old irrigation ditches. Another man was brought before a grand jury for stabbing a falcon, whatever you want to call him, with a pitchfork that was killing one of his chickens. Another man was charged for shooting a bear in self-defense. In Newark, New Jersey, 500 people have been fined for putting aluminum cans in their trash. These and possibly thousands of other examples damage the societal sense of morality. That is, people who see themselves as responsible, law-abiding people begin to develop a contempt for the law. And when we lump what's trivial with what's barbaric as criminal activities, as we are increasingly doing in our country, it undermines our sense of moral priorities. As in the case of Newark, where 500 people have been fined for deliberately or inadvertently putting beer cans in their trash. That kind of says to people, well, it's more important to prosecute people for these kinds of activities than to prosecute all the thieves, murderers, and rapists in Newark, New Jersey. The growth of the Leviathan state is undermining our moral priorities. And we become criminals for engaging in activities previously deemed as moral and lawful. For example, Congress has a reduced ability to give cash handouts to farmers. So what's an alternative? Well, Congress can mandate a share of the gasoline market for ethanol producers. And that forces consumers to give farmers money that they otherwise would not get. Now here's how you criminalize human behavior. A gasoline producer who refuses to use ethanol becomes a criminal, whereby before he was not a criminal. We have criminalized another activity. If the Clinton administration and Congress managed to socialize our health care, what is moral and lawful right now, namely paying a doctor out of our own pockets, will be a criminal activity. Lovers of kangaroo rats. A lot of people out there love kangaroo rats. They could go to Congress for an appropriation to purchase land for these creatures to live. But that would be a visible cost, and with budget squeezes, such a visible cost might not be politically viable. So Congress can hide the transfer through the Endangered Species Act, mandating that private landowners set aside a portion of their land for the kangaroo rat. Enforcing rules like these that have no moral foundation and have the most trivial of benefits with increasing punitive measures undermines respect for and the perceived legitimacy of government. And as that happens, government attempts to coerce respect that it cannot earn. And because there are enforcement costs and the lack of resources, government has to exact draconian penalties for minor offenses in order to set examples as a means to get general compliance. Now, the only hope that I have, things look pretty dismal. And matter of fact, if you are I think one has to recognize that the normal state of human affairs is for a person to be subject to arbitrary control and abuse by others. That's the normal state of human affairs, both historically and currently right now. And liberty, the kind of liberty that you and I have known in our country, is relatively rare in human history. It's not the normal state of affairs. I'm very sure that if a historian writing 300 years from now, he may very well say, well, look, we had this little historical curiosity called liberty, mostly in the Western world for a few years, but everything went back to the way that it always was. So I'm not all that optimistic about liberty, but the only hope that I have for the amputation of the heavy hand of government in our country is the 10th Amendment movement, the embryonic 10th Amendment movement going on in many parts of our country. You know, I've been writing a nationally syndicated column for about 14 years, and last October, I wrote a column that brought in the most favorable and supportive mail that I've ever received. And the column started out with a sentence that I said in the column that I think that we reached the point in our country where liberty-minded Americans need to start thinking about secession. And I was saying in the column that I'm not an expert on secession, but I was proposing that we keep the liberty-minded Americans keep the 13 original states plus Texas and give the rest to the socialists with an option to buy it.